Would you like to start with prayer?
Yes, let's start with prayer. Let us pray. Oh God, you promised living waters. We have seen those waters fulfill and make the earth fruitful and make this congregation fruitful. Let it be our guide to continue to take us along the path that you want. Guide our hearts and our minds and our souls today as we proclaim your word, as we consider the business and life and the work of this church, and as we continue faithfully in the path you have set for us. Amen. Oh, look at that. We have, you might have,
All right. So are there any questions for our board chairs aside from stewardship? Because they'll be coming up later to talk about budget. Any questions for them? All right. Well, then let's get started. I'm probably going to forget some of my... Oh, yep. Go ahead, Sherry. Thank you, Sherry. Any other questions? Dave?
There'll be time for questions later, or we'll supposed to ask them now?
If you have any questions about board reports specifically. But yeah, of course there will be time for questions throughout. Sherry? Okay. Good.
So, I have questions about the community outreach.
Yeah.
The community outreach talks about really setting the community market
Yes.
for John Glenn. And, I just already mentioned that. But I've also heard about glasses, about hearing aids.
Glasses, it's been a couple years. We're hoping to bring them back to John Glenn. Rita's been reaching out, but I think everybody's going through rough times right now, so we're hoping, but that's a work in progress. The hearing aids are also a work in progress. There's a lot of rules when it comes to medical stuff. Yes. We're working on it. It's challenging right now, but good question. But yeah, at John Glenn, really, community market is our big thing right now. The launching pad, the free store, the store is pretty much built, which is kind of cool. I've seen it. It's but we're going to open in the fall. So once all the construction is finally over. All right. Any other questions about things boards are doing? All right. So I'm definitely going to forget my Robert's Rules of Order here at some point, so please remind me when I make a mistake. So we've been in discussion this year with these last few months with a lot of people involved in youth and education, and we have made a decision, or to ask for a decision today, to combine those two boards, youth and education, into a new board that we would like to call the Board of Faith Formation. As many of you know, both of those boards have been functioning with very few members for the past long time, just a couple of members here and there, and they've been doing a lot of work. This would allow for a little bigger board that would be kind of overseeing the responsibilities of what was formerly both boards, but overseeing everything that our children do, but also us as adults do for education. So the PPC is proposing a motion, this is in your agenda, to combine the boards of education and youth. This new board will encompass all aspects of faith formation across Lutheran Church. This board will be known as the Board of Faith Formation. Their duties will include, but not be limited to, Sunday school and adult education, youth events, confirmation, pageants, and intergenerational activities. Do I have a second for the motion? All right, Luann, write down one of those people. All right, and then we'll open it up for discussion. Any discussion about this proposal? Sherry? We didn't want to lose the aspects of the Board of Youth. We didn't want to lose the parts. It's not all education, right? Some of it's just fun, and this is a name we talked a long time about this name.
Yeah.
So.
Well, faith isn't a matter of just learning something, right? Education is important.
I'll put this on. Education's important in how our faith is formed, but so are relationships, so are experiences, so are different things beyond education. We felt that it was a little bit of a narrow cast to just focus on education. Some people don't learn. Some people don't acquire things in the same way from educational methods, right? We know that we have teachers here. There's kinetic learners, and there's book learners, and there's this learners and experienced learners. So,
and we really didn't want to lose that youth part of it, that youth group aspect of it.
But faith is formed, and faith is something that is always formed. Education has a connotation and a cultural understanding, or at least an assumption that you are educated, then you're done. And formation, you're always being formed. That's where we were thinking.
Good question. Thank you, Sherry. Any other discussion? All right, so let's call for the question. And then we're ready. All right, Carolyn is calling for the question. Thank you. Second? Thank you. All right, all in favor of the motion? Say aye. All right, those opposed? All right, the motion is carried.
Abstain.
Any abstain?
No abstentions. Okay.
All right, the motion has carried. All right, so the next thing on our agenda here is an amendment to our Constitution. I went to a meeting with Jamie right before our last annual meeting. It was a virtual meeting with the Synod on how to host a virtual annual meeting, which we did last year. And they said, turn in your Constitution to this 1C1008. And we don't have that. So we're missing a few things from the Model Constitution. So this language comes directly from the Model Constitution of the ELCA, but it allows us to meet virtually. So the motion is that to add this to our Constitution. The congregation may hold meetings by remote communication, including electronically and by telephone conference, as long as there is an opportunity for simultaneous oral communication. To the extent permitted by state law, notice of all meetings may be provided electronically. This is something we've already been doing. Do we have a motion? All right, thank you, Sharon. Do we have a second? All right, thank you, Peter. Any discussion? Sherry?
So does this mean that all the meetings we held last year virtually
Yeah, kind of. We're kind of making up for that. Yeah, I mean, we've already been doing it, but we felt like, we should probably make this official. Any other discussion? So, the plan for our executive committee is to spend kind of the next year going through our Constitution and making sure we've got those sort of things. We've been doing it, so I think this allows boards to vote virtually, but not necessarily this meeting.
It's
Yeah, when we were at the, Synod Assembly this year, they had us vote on Zoom and it was very straightforward.
Because of the written option on Zoom to
Mhm.
share
Yep.
a chat, people aren't familiar with Zoom.
Yep.
You can not just,
Well, in the voting, it came up kind of in your screen, so it was just you looking at it and you can vote, so.
Yeah, it's an actual tool that allows the controller, the person who's got the program, to actually set up a poll. You can poll, you can do a yes or no, that's a vote, right? And everybody gets it, and you can set it for so many minutes to respond, and at the end, up pops your results. That simple. And the Synod has used it before, this specific tool on multiple occasions, and I've used it in other places where their votes are happening, and it's pretty slick and it's pretty good.
No,
No.
we don't,
Well, I have a professional account. I can take over 100 people for over an hour for unlimited time, or up to 100, but it's not. I have it.
we had discussion about, when Lori was here, about having a cross Zoom account. The problem is you have to have an email tied to that, and you can change it around, but that seemed messy at the time. But now we have Scott, and he's got this professional account that we could use in that situation.
We can use
We
that
probably
until
wouldn't
we
use
set up
mine
our own.
anymore.
Yeah. Mine is paid for by Lydia Place, an organization I still run and work with, and we are happy to share it with whoever needs to use it.
And they're
So,
part of our synod, so.
yeah. So,
That's a good question.
I think if we were to need a Zoom account, we'd have to bring it. It wouldn't be that much. It's like $69 a year or something for the recurring. I think I paid more to start, but
Yeah.
of course that pricing changes by demand, and Zoom has gotten so huge.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I think it's fine for all board chairs, or, I know Sherry has Dave Olson, one of her members, run the Zoom, and I don't see a problem with that for board's meeting. All right,
The what?
any other discussion? All right, John has moved for the question. Do we have a second? All right. Those in favor? Those opposed? Those abstaining? All right, the motion is carried. All right, Justin's gonna come talk about the budget. It's all good news, so.
No,
No.
any budget should be both good news and bad news, otherwise you're not doing it right. But it's a lot of good news. And no new bad news, so. Pretty good. All right, I got no special graphics, everything I'm gonna have, yes. We have my phone. I'm gonna use the microphone. Test, test. For the record, that was my wife to ask me to speak louder. All right, nothing I'm going to show up here isn't on your annual report, all right? So everything on here everything up here is on here. Page 15, this is on page 15. So first off, I'm going to talk about 2021, how things went in 2021, and then I'm going to talk about, thank you, and then I'm going to talk about moving into 2022, and then we'll put the budgets up for a vote. Sound good? And then two things about savings. So first off, 2021. On page 15, right here, 2021 estimate, 2021 actual. You can see right here where it says, pardon my shadow, total income. We had estimated 228,000 income for 2021, and we ended up with 244,000. That's an increase, a significant increase, and that mostly is due to more donations from all the people in this room. So thank you very much. Not only thank you very much, but thank you to the people who are around you, because it's not just individuals in here. It's on average, everyone has increased their giving for 2021, and that is so much appreciated. That's what that is people putting their dollars where their hearts are at. Thank you. So that's great news. We talked about good news. That is definitely some great news going into 2022. More great news is if we go down on page 15, we started with income. Let's talk about expense. Yeah, that works. Again, 2021, as far as expense is concerned, down here at the bottom is total expense, 228. It was a balanced budget, so it's the same numbers from before. And our expense was 216, so our expenses were lower. Mostly that is in going with Delta and Omicron. We went remote again, so when we use the church less, our expenses are lower. That's not what we want, but that is a good result from that, in that we spend less on church properties. That's really, everything else is pretty much according to plan, mostly. Youth ministry didn't use as much, but that is understood as well. And one more thing, as far as lay ministry is concerned, you'll see here, lay ministry and then interim pastors services, so that everyone is on the same page. Lay ministry controls salaries, so all our payroll goes through the lay ministry board. And over the past 3 years, lay ministry has done an excellent job at figuring out what the budgeted amount for our pastor salary is going to be as we transition from Pastor Bob to the interim to Pastor Scott now. Going into that on a budgetary level is like throwing a dart at a dartboard, and they did very well. Ultimately, lay ministry for 2021 was budgeted $172 and came in just $2,000 off of that. If you not having known your pastor going into that, that's a great feat. So thank you very much, lay ministry, for the work with that. The estimate for income, or the estimate for? Well, I'll talk about 22 in just a moment. So ultimately, what that leads, more income, less expense, we end up with a $30,000 surplus going into 2022. That's great news. Thank you for your faithful donations. I want you to take that number and put it in your back pocket for just a second as I talk about our people here. Could I have you go up to page 14? The middle column where it says weekly giving. Anyone have any questions where I'm looking at? Peter, to answer your question, that's what I'm touching on right now, okay? Over the past several years, from 2020 to 2021 to 2022, we have this figure for total giving units. A giving unit is essentially a family, a source of income, a pledge, if you will. My family, Allison and I, that's one giving unit. Paul's a giving unit as well, as a single person. Still single, right? Sorry. But it's a good example. So that number has decreased over the past several years. When I talk about no new bad news, that's what I'm talking about. We've known about this. I've said this over probably every budget meeting for the last however many years I've been doing this, probably 10. For 2022, that's a big drop, 20. There's a little bit of musical chairs going on with that, with Oslin's leaving. It's not just Amy and Doug, it's also Signy, I believe, is a giving unit on our rolls, or was a giving unit. Simon, thank you. Simon, I believe, too. Once they graduate, we don't expect we don't expect a whole lot of money from a college graduate, but it is how we do it is once they graduate high school, they become a giving unit, and we send out envelopes, and they are members of our church. Yes.
Once they're confirmed, they become
Excuse me.
a member and giving unit.
Once they're confirmed. So there's a little bit of musical chairs, so it's not as bad as that, but it is a reduction. But for purposes of 2021, when we talk about people who pledge, and that's where we're getting into why the estimate is so low, we have pledges, and we have to work off of those pledges. Number of people who pledge is up by 2. I'll take it. So it's not all doom and gloom. We have more people pledging this year. We have an increased dollar amount pledging. That's great too. So it's not just pledging for a smaller amount. But this 117,000, that is the pledged amount, and that's what we got to go forward into 2022. Why the amount is so low? Because we start with 117. That's the pledge, and now I'm going to go back down to page 15. I appreciate your patience with going back and forth on this. So page 15, our estimate for 2022, that 117 goes into this. There's a couple other things that that covers income. There's a estimate that through the work of Carol and our counters, we call it non-pledge giving, but we can't afford to not be conservative with that number. So it's a pretty accurate estimate that Carol does every year. And our estimate for income for 2022 based off pledge giving is 131,000. Do you have any questions about that? You asked a direct question, and I appreciate that because it's the blaring thing. That's what we talked about in the budget meeting. It's the right thing to be talking about. Does anyone have any questions about that? One thing I glossed over before, and I apologize for doing that, this dedicated funds released. Going back to 2021, 28,000, that was money from savings. A couple of the savings was just being freed up, but also some of it was to shore up and to balance a budget from last year. If you remember me talking about the $30,000 surplus in our back pocket, the plan for 2022 is to take 8,000 of that, so leaving $22,000 still in our back pocket, $8,000 in savings that we're going to release, surplus that we're going to release, and then other income is $63,000. That's rent from the other congregations. That's rent for it's various income from other sources. Our estimated income is $203,000 going into next year. Couple that with expense. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, go ahead.
That's okay. Did the people who rent the building from us still pay during COVID? Because I'm not noticing a big difference and now I'm not seeing it on this page, but I saw it on your page, rental.
I can answer the question.
Okay.
We forgave some rent at the beginning of the pandemic. So that was 2020. So you'll see that here under church properties. So these are expenses, and I'm sorry about my shadow again. Church properties in 2020 was slightly lower than the year before. And that's where we see that forgiveness. And the idea behind that, and this was decided, is that it's better to come out of this with renters intact and relationships intact than try to exact every cent when everything just got thrown up in the air.
And also in 2020, we had that PPP loan, which helped keep us going and able to pay, we were able to pay everybody fully throughout the pandemic because we got that loan while forgiving rent.
And that's right here. And that was forgiven, yes. What's up?
So the rent was decreased for both the congregations that rent here, starting in 2020, through the time that we were not in church. So when we came back in May, we asked them for a little bit more, because we were also not letting them in, and we were only letting them in for their worship service. They couldn't use the building, just like we weren't using the building for anything else. So it did go into last year. We are now getting, because Seventh Day is in here more, we are getting their full rent that we used to get prior to COVID. Promesa is not back fully, so they're paying that a little bit additional, but not their typical rent. And, something else, I forgot,
No, it's a good question. It's good to bring that up. So that's income. Moving down on page 15 just a little bit. These are our expenses. It's going to be pretty much the same story as far as planned expenses for 2022 as it was for 2021, with one major exception. If you look at lay ministry, last year it had been estimated $172, ended up being $2,000 less than that, and now we're at $148,000 in pay. That's mostly payroll. That's Pastor Osland. That reduction. Hate to not have her here. It is what it is. But one of the benefits of that is our expenses are less. So a reduction in expenses on lay ministry, everything else be roughly the same. That with the $8,000 surplus from 2021 leads us to a balanced budget right here. That leaves still $22,000 roughly in our back pocket. That will go back into savings, because if you remember me talking about 2021, it's basically replacing the 28,000 from here. Sorry for turning that out. It's basically replacing the 28,000 from 2021. That's it. I got two more things to talk about, but that is the 2022 budget. Does anyone have any questions? Awesome. Can I have you go down to page 17? I got two more things I want to talk about. I don't think that's going to work. Whatever. So page 17 is our savings accounts. Two things I want to talk about on here. First off is if you go down, you got capital improvement fund. So we start at the year at 29, we end at this, we spent this, and we made this. Bottom line, we spent $40,000 on capital of our capital improvement fund this year. In my family, we're the church is the people family. You know, the church is the house, church is the steeple. It's not the house, not the steeple, it's the people. But those people practice and are willing to come to church because they're warm. So our boilers were bought with that money, and we raised funds. There was $17,000 that was given to that fund over the last year. So thank you very much. It's another way that the congregation and the people here have proven that they care about the building and care about our family here by servicing that savings account. And that's where that money went and how it got spent out. Any questions on the boiler? Thank you for everyone who's involved with that. And last thing. This is at the bottom of the page, very, very bottom. And it kind of goes to Sherry's questions about John Glenn and the mission fund, or the fund for missions, and you're going to have to bear with me for a second. So fund for missions, this is the community market for the most part, is what this was designed for. $40,000 at the beginning. And now we have $89,000 there. Our community outreach has, I've seen this, if you'll bear with me for a little bit, seen Bonnie Davidson start off a groundswell when she came and talked about a program that she saw at a different at a school called Jet Fuel Backpack, and that was 5-7 years ago. Bonnie Davidson moved on. Michelle Simon kind of took that idea over, and we started doing the food drives at the source. And Michelle Simon found a way to get Merrick Food Shelf involved with that, and then Sylvia has taken over the liaison with John Glenn, and we have the multiple Mrs. Ericksons in the room, advocating and allowing us to partner with them. And that, doing those fundamentals right, has allowed us to bring in outside money and outside donations, because they know that we're not just taking the money and buying Pastor Scott a new car or Carol a raise. That money will go, rather than to what I was talking about before, the budget, that will go here, and that money will get spent to talk about what you were talking about, what are we doing with glasses and hearing aids. And that fund was set up 2019, I think. It was when Pastor Bob was leaving, and then the pandemic happened, and there were some shifts, and so the groundswell for getting this off its feet has been slow. But it's been kind of kicking the pants over the past year with Corrine Johnson's estate. Because Corrine Johnson saw all that, and she knew that our church would do the right thing. She knew that our church would do the right thing with her estate, or at least the portion that was given to us. And so when we see a huge amount of money put in there, that's a lot of our giving here, and that's a huge donation from the Corrine Johnson estate. And that makes a different story than every story I've said over the past however many years I've been doing this, probably 10, where up till now it's been get by year to year. Well, we got a thing to do now, and we got money to do it with, and we've got people to do it with and for. And so there's lots of discussion and lots of missions that are on the table that we've got to work on. And it's a different conversation than it has been, and that's an important thing to recognize, and that's what I want to do here. Your point about been hearing about glasses, yeah, that was 2 years ago. Hearing aids, it's all in discussion, because we don't want to do the wrong thing, and it is a little bit of a different story. But here's where it's at, and that's not our money. That's money for sending out or that we have to figure out what to do with. And that's great. It's a great thing. It's a great thing to have. It's also a great responsibility. So does anyone have any other questions? I'm done talking after that. Yes?
I'm assuming the reason why community market is all zeros is because of the Steve Foundation?
Right. So when we did the Fund for Missions, these are pretty much old places to hold that money,
Okay.
and all of these missions are just on paper to transfer up to here. And there's still some money left in the jet fuel backpack program, but essentially this is all the same thing. For all intents and purposes, this is all the same thing. For now, it's going to be our missions at John Glenn. That could expand out based off of the Mission Fund Committee and us finding things to do, but this is all pretty much the same thing. But that's a good question. These things are just the old version of that. All right, that's it. Anything? I've gone on. Thank you. Oh, yeah, Sharon.
I just want to say one thing. I know firsthand that putting that community market together is a big job, getting food orders, the volunteers, everything. And I think we owe Sylvia a great deal.
Absolutely. And the only reason I didn't is because she gets mad when I do. So thank you. I'm sorry, yes, Peter?
Miscellaneous non-budget seems to be a slow and vicious kind of thing. We started with $180. We wound up with $1,180. Some $1,000 snuck in on your booking.
Yes, sometimes people will give for a specific thing, or they don't give a certain amount with anything intended. There are strict rules about how we manage money coming in based off of donor intent. Sometimes people, when we give weekly, that money is going into our budget. Other dollars, that's why we have a lot of different lines on here. I can't tell you exactly what that $1,000 is. It's in a savings account right now. At a certain point, it will probably be going towards.
So it wasn't a receipt, it just sort of appeared, right?
I'm sorry?
It's not in the receipts column, that $1,000. It just sort of appeared.
I honestly can't.
Fat fingers by the secretary, I'll have to look into that problem.
Did you hear that?
No.
The secretary has just said fat fingers by the secretary, and she will look into that. So thank you for bringing that up. This is why we do it, because this is why we do this meeting. So thank you very much, and we'll take a look at that. Thank you. Anyone else? Thank you.
Yeah, let's thank Justin. He's stepping down after this year, so let's thank him for all his years. All right, so we're going to vote on the budget, and then I have an amendment to make, but we vote first, right? We need to accept the budget? All right, so do we have a motion to accept the budget? Carol, thank you. Do we have a second? Sharon. All right, any other discussion about the budget? All right, all in favor of the budget? Opposed? Okay, now we have to do the amendment. All right. So I'm bringing up an amendment. The executive committee, meaning myself, Paul, and Pastor Scott, we have been attending with the Synod and some other churches in our area sessions on, it's called Liberating Structures. It's been very worthwhile for the three of us to go and hear what other churches are doing and kind of look to the future for Cross, but it costs money. We need $1,000 to pay for this year. So the amendment would be to add $1,000 to the budget for that purpose. All right, we have it moved. A second, Jim, thank you. Any discussion about that?
Well,
Go ahead, Wayne.
you're going to add $1,000 to the expense,
Yes.
and then you're going to add $1,000 to release of education.
Yes.
So the net effect of the budget will be
0, yes. Good. Yep. Thank you. All right. So, those in favor of the amendment? Aye. Opposed? All right. So that has passed. Now we're going to vote on the budget as amended. All right. Do we have a motion for that? Carol has moved. Second, Sherry, thank you. All right. All those in favor of the budget as amended? Aye. Opposed? All right, the motion has carried. We have passed our budget. All right, so let's go now to our board and officer election ballot. There are no changes on the executive board. Board of Church Properties, we've got quite a few new nominees. One note I want to make about that is that we are making a few changes there, and you'll see there's no director listed. The plan for now is to have Paul is going to ex officio lead that board for a little while because Carol has other jobs we need her to do. Board of Faith Formation, everybody is new there. Lay Ministry, no one is leaving. And Stewardship, Carol will be moving to Stewardship as Justin is leaving stewardship, we want her financial expertise in that space.
I know you have it in front of you, just to make it a little easier. Anybody is in bold is a new member, and then if you're not in bold, that's an ongoing member. And then when it's time for the actual vote, we'll just put up the names of the new members.
Yep.
I can do that now.
And then if you go to the back, yep, go ahead. Yeah.
Can I ask you for space coordination? Did anybody choose not to be on, or was she forgotten?
No, we tried several times to contact her and were unable to. Good question. If you go to the back of the ballot, normally we vote on conference assembly delegates. Well, the conference assembly was last week. So due to our postponing of this meeting, I'd just like to thank Dan and Sherry for stepping up to the plate and going to the conference assembly last week for us. So thank you. We appreciate their willingness to step in.
And I want to say that they put the time in. I think it was 24 minutes. Yeah, it was.
And I think they didn't even have to leave home. It was on Zoom, so.
If we're in East Central Conference, downtown St. Paul, it's another thing. It's hours of wrangling. But for some reason, our conference, which is us over to Stillwater, is pretty easygoing, and things move. Yeah, past. Karna, Pastor Karna, yeah.
All right, but we do need delegates for Synod Assembly. It's Friday, May 13th, and Saturday, May 14th. Their plan is to be in person at this point. It's going to be at St. Andrews in Matamidi. They will get more details as, we can't make decisions that far out right now, so. The Synod feels the same way. So we need 2 delegates and 2 alternates, 1 male, 1 female of each. Sherry? Yes, you're welcome. I know, I had to go for you. No, I had never been. I didn't have to leave my kitchen, so it was good. All right, so Sherry is our.
Let me ask you a question.
We have 2 delegates, 2 alternates.
Okay.
All right, so Sherry is our female delegate. Yeah. That's a good question. All right. All right, Carolyn is our alternate. Carolyn.
No.
All right, boys.
If all the guys would stand up. No, you don't do that. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Yeah.
This is always the long part, and I'm a middle school teacher. I can wait.
It's a lot of fun. It's a weekend. Oh, it's fishing opener?
Oh, jeez.
Well, I don't fish. I fish for men, women. Yeah. I observe the sweater opener, and I can wear my Norwegian sweater. That's my opener. So we might have to do some digging. Is that it?
I mean.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, you got a nice lunch last year. He was at my house, but.
Bring a lawn chair.
All right, Dan is going to be our delegate. Alternate,
And this is where you say Dan's a pretty reliable.
yeah, well, I mean, clearly you already went to the conference assembly. We just need somebody just in case. Yeah, we gotta have somebody. We just need an alternate. Jim Border, all right.
What, Jim?
Thank you, everybody. All right, so do I have a motion to vote on this ballot? Thank you, Sherry. Do we have a second? Thank you, Justin. All right, any discussion? All right, all in favor of the ballot?
Aye.
All opposed? All right, the ballot has carried. I think that's it on our voting for today. Yeah, go ahead, Sherry. Yes.
And, you know, it's part of the budget and part of Pastor's report about the several large gifts we received. Why is it that that's it's such a philosophic thing to do, and yet we don't speak up. We have to hear it at annual meetings. I don't understand that. How am I supposed to say to my neighbor, we should give some money to church, when we don't speak up? Carol mentioned to me, should I write it in the prosperity? And I said, yeah. I said, people need to know when someone gives a gift. Corinne would be shocked to think that we wouldn't teach about giving.
Well, I think that's something we consider adding to the cross currents. I think we'd need people's permission before we did that, before we named anyone. But we could ask. Sure.
I just think that we need to praise people for thinking ahead of the things that, you know, we can do for each other even after.
That's a good point. There are some things in the works right now that are not ready for discussion. Just know we're working on some things around that. Thank you, Sherry. All right, so I'm going to turn it over to Pastor Scott for his report.
One thing I will say, Sherry, is that, of course, I'm just beginning my third trimester here. I just finished, 8 months. And those 8 months have been marked by so many changes. In coming into a congregation that has experienced so many changes. I mean, when things like a pastor of 30 years leaves, right? That's a huge transition. And then you are going through the process of beginning to deal with that transition when all of a sudden what happens? COVID. And it throws everything into flux and into uncertainty. And it shakes the very ground that we thought we were standing on, right? And on top of that, one of the things that COVID has done, and I believe one thing I'm thankful that COVID has done, has pointed out in the church, and this is the broad church, some of the real issues that we are facing as congregations in the ELCA, as Christian congregations, among culture, among young people, among our brothers and sisters through Christ who may treat people differently, have different ethics and different ways of going about things. And what COVID has done is help bring that into light and accelerate some of the anxiety around all those changes. I mean, believe me, I work, I'm very active in the Synod and the Synod things. I work with a couple of other organizations on a regular basis about what does it mean to lead the church into change, or what does it mean to manage the church in the midst of change. And I mentioned it, I think, in my opening bio that I'm I'm now the secretary of something called the Academy of Religious Leadership. This is a worldwide organization that deals with professors and practitioners and writers and people who are, how do we think about leadership in the church and in communities of faith? And it goes from those kind of high-level discussions to the synodical discussions, to discussions in the executive committee, in the PPC, in the Board of Lay Ministry. Some of you have experienced this. And, when you had Lori here for a while, Pastor Lori, who I think did a beautiful job, but the work and the ground that we're walking on is so unsteady yet that, we were all hoping that by the time you called a pastor, me too, that you called a settled pastor, that COVID would sort of fade out and we wouldn't have to be dealing with some of these issues of masking and shutdowns and spikes in, and we're not. And we don't even know if there are other variations that are going to show up. We have to be prepared that there are. I am amazed, to tell you the truth, that budgetarily wise, in terms of our giving and our budget and our faithfulness through those kind of gifts, our faithfulness through our gathering together in worship, our faithfulness towards the mission we have, especially in John Glenn, our openness to having to take different steps as we walk into the murk, because nothing's really clear where we're heading. As we do that, the faithfulness and the patience that you all are showing each other and the leadership of this congregation and me. I got to brag a bit in a pastor's group the other day. They were all bemoaning the fact that their budgets, and I'm saying, well, this little church, this smaller church, we have a $30,000 budget. A $30,000 budget surplus. That's a good word. Yeah, I don't use those. And a $50,000 new gift. I mean, that's almost $100,000. That's an amazing legacy. And I do think we do need to think about legacy giving and how we might leverage Kareen's gift and the other gifts we are getting for John Glenn and other mutual funds, so that money is used in a way that it also makes it sustainable and it can continue to grow. There's ways to invest it. There's ways to think about how we use it instead of just spending it down when we get it. And that's some of the things we're talking about. But those discussions take a bit of time. And once we know more, we can present it, because you're all going to vote on it and you're all going to have a say in it. But I'm amazed at that faithfulness. I'm amazed at the people who continually step up and show up. I'm amazed by the patience of the parents of young ones who know that this isn't quite the great situation for their kids yet. Now, I wish they all were vaccinated, upon birth. I just wish that was the way it happened. We're expecting our second grandson, and I would really hope that he'd just get the vaccine as part of that first set of shots that babies get. Not that would be a good thing. But that faithfulness is what I want to hang on. That faithfulness that sometimes that God will continue to make a way for us. That I touched upon it today in that Waters of Life. That idea, as I was writing that sermon this week, my mind went to spring melt in Colorado. I lived in Breckenridge for a while. I lived up on a mountain, on the side of a mountain. I was just a ski bum, right? And the snow would start to melt, and the sound of that tinkling of the spring melt, and that water would just keep running down. I could go out my front porch and just see it coming down the side of Red Mountain, which was the mountain I lived in. And nothing could dam it up, right? It's going to seek where it's going to go. And I think that's how the Spirit moves. And we have to look at what would be helpful for us is to continue to see and look at where are we placing barriers to where the Spirit's moving and where the Spirit's calling us, where that unrelenting gravitational pull of God's love, as I spoke about in the sermon, where God is pulling us to, where we might be throwing barriers, where we might be reluctant and want to just pull it up and keep it for ourselves. One of the things that really, really attracted me, that I felt really called to this congregation, was this John Glenn step. And a group, a sign for me that the Spirit was at work, calling you out of the building into the world, into where there was need, and a great need, and a need that's only going to get bigger, right? We have 400 new students coming next year. That's 280, whatever, new families. How many of those might be in need? There's other need in the neighborhood. There are other things that pop up that we are able to, because we are gifted, because we have empathetic and loving hearts, because we want to do justice, that we can step into and embrace and follow that nudge that God says, okay, this is happening, let's step into it. But at the same time, we don't want to lose the past and certain the foundations that have helped build and form us. I like that formation, faith formation, as opposed to educate. We've learned certain things, you know. I don't know if anybody can still quote the answer to the third. When the heck? It's the third article. Yeah. See. If anybody can really quote that, that's great. But I bet you every one of you could tell you what that meant. Could tell a story about those things we learned in confirmation, we learned in Sunday school, that we learned from sermons and from adult ed and stuff. Where it really is played out is how does it reflect in the stories of our lives, and how we love and serve each other, and how we love and serve the neighbor, and how we are faithful to this call. I long for a day, and we haven't had that. We've had, Amy decided it was time for her to move, and I think with a lot of things going on with her life and her kids, it was the right move for her. And Chelsea fell in love and moved to Chicago and is living, on the lake shore. I'm sure she really misses living in Minnesota. But we might ask her to come back and play a couple weekends. But that has opened up. Emily's had to work really, really hard to figure out how do we continue our excellence in worship when we can't get a consistent organist. And there are not a lot of consistent organist candidates out there right now. But we're finding other ways with piano, with the alternative worship. This Emily Urban, the woman who's going to play for us during Lent, spent 4 years. She went to Syracuse to study piano performance. She spent 4 years on Broadway in New York playing. She's an amazing musician. And that is going to be a musically rich worship. So I wish we could get into a situation where we had a rhythm that we could just follow for weeks upon weeks upon weeks upon weeks and get into the work of some of the other things God might be calling us through that rhythm, through a consistent rhythm, comfortable rhythm. But we're still not there yet. And it's so many other things happening, COVID and death of beloved members. Even having to I think about Marie, having to wait so long, 18 months to bury Daryl. What a disruption that was. Not only for her and her family, but for her. And there are all kinds of stories like that. So I thank you for your patience. I thank you for your support. Things are going to continue to move. We're going to continue to march right along. God is going to continue to call us into things. We might not know what they are until they arrive at our doorstep. Or they might be things that we can look at and say, oh, like Justin, we've got this $90,000 fund. How might we use that even more faithfully and make it richer and build it so that maybe that becomes something that there are lots of people willing to give from the outside of our congregation just to help with that kind of ministry in our neighborhood. So it'll come. We have the right people on our boards. We have the right hearts here. It will come, and I trust it'll come. I wouldn't have been here. I wouldn't have taken this call had it not. if it would have seemed like nothing was going to happen. God, I really felt strongly that this is where I was being called with my particular gifts and my particular understandings, my particular brand of Lutheran optimism, right? Maybe it's not a great optimism. Dan, what's Lutheran optimism? Yeah, you won't even say. But I love being here. Thank you very much. We will move. We will follow the lead of the Spirit. We'll continue to work together to more closely enable, to set that foundation so we all can be able to more deeply and clearly see where God is calling us together, and as individuals and as families and as individual groups within the church, into what God's future, God's preferred future, I say, this future God wants for us and for all creation. So thank you very much. I'm really excited about the coming year. And if I don't quit talking, we're going to start, the snow's going to start. Pastoral, okay. See, I'm learning as I go. We did have a number of pastoral acts. I just want to call these attention. We had 2 baptisms. I love baptisms. Carter Daniel Sunsmo on June 26th, and Gabriel David Dickens, July 18th. And we have 2 more coming up. The two new Lund grandchildren are going to baptize on the 20th, so come. Let's make it a big welcome for those 2 little babies. We're going to have a double, no, we're not dunkers, but I want to call it a double dunk, right? We're going to have 2 Lunds together. That'll be wonderful. We confirmed Lainey Linroth and Matthew Manzinski in confirmation. We will be, I believe, 3 children entering into confirmation sometime this summer, or at least in the early fall. Funerals. Florence Anderson died on January 22nd. Her service was held not through cross. Elsie Anderson on April 3rd. Ella Nagel on May 23rd. Sharon Olson on June 5th. And I remember that so much because I had my first meet and greet the day after she died. And a lot of you were so kind in the midst of your grief to welcome us. Bridget, we celebrated her life. Bridget Digg on August 7th. Daryl Anderson on September 18th, after way too long. And then Richard Eldridge, we had a funeral here for him on November 12th. He was a non-member but had a long history in the neighborhood and with the church. I think he might have gone to school here, and he might have been a former member. Is that right, Carol? And then, in the midst of this kind of loss, we welcome 6 new members. Bonnie Ditchinger, Dave and Mary Lee, welcome back into membership here. Sherry Kiefer, my wife Kelly, and Robin K. Smith. And then, by virtue of being called by you, I'm actually the 7th new member. And then Josh Seaman, who's just a wonderful guy. He still shows up, especially during football season with his Packer gear. He transferred on July 1st to another church, and we hear from him once in a while, and he's just a delightful, delightful person. So let's thank you for those who have supported those baptisms and those funerals. We worked, the United Sisters, you worked so hard to create a welcoming environment so people could have a meal, people could have a time together and mourn, and that is such a valuable thing. Thank you. So with that said, we have 365 days, give or take a couple of weeks because of COVID, until we do this again. And I can't wait to see where we are a year from now. God bless you all. God bless this church.
We're going to close with a song. Find something different.
Sent forth by God's blessing. So let's use this as our sending prayer. Sing it as if it's a prayer. Martin Luther used to say, when you sing a hymn, you pray twice, right? Something about singing is special. And let's pray twice that we're sent forth by God's blessing as we end this annual meeting. Thank you for being here, and God bless you all.
You've been unplugged. No, sir. Oh, you're ready, yeah. We don't have all the people out there, one would need in a digital age. So send forth, what number is that, Emily?
547, sent forth. Let's rise. Sent forth by God's blessing, our true faith confessing, the people of God from this dwelling take leave. The supper is ended, oh now be extended the fruits of this service in all who believe. The seed of Christ's teaching, receptive souls reaching, shall blossom in action for God and for all. Your grace shall incite us, your love shall unite us to work for your kingdom and answer His call. With praise and thanksgiving to God ever living, the tasks of our everyday life we will face. Our faith ever sharing, in love ever caring, embracing God's children, the whole human race. With your feast to feed us, with your light now lead us, unite us as one in this life that we share. Then may all the living with praise and thanksgiving give honor to Christ and His name that we bear. Go in peace and serve the Lord, friends. If any of you new members of council could just stay for a minute, I have just one thing to tell you about, and then we'll move. It's just one council business, just stuff